So for my label, I have folded it in half and matched the ends of my longest line and gotten my two sides or my two middles there, and then matched that to the top and the bottom of my two lines there and got my centers there, middles there. Okay, now with this, since I'm using like these cast-offs, I want to like fit it over one of these squares if I can. If I can't, that's okay. I just need to make sure that my label is covered, and I'm also making sure I don't have anything that has a direction on this back. There's no letterings here. There's really no hog. This is past it. Okay, I'm trying to get it into the center of where there's nothing. And if you'll notice, this is just as wide as my current label. So I can stitch around and not have to worry about getting that, because I'm going to cut this white down to match the label. Okay. So in fact, what I can do right now is just trim that. Just so I know where to place them. Now, the one thing about sublimation is if you press the label with a hot, steamy iron, you will most likely loosen the ink enough to ghost onto something else. So if you want to press this label, you need to make sure you use a press cloth on it or anything like that. I am looking to find my back. That's my back because it's more fuzzy than the front. Okay. I'm going to line this up as best I can because that one was going a little sideways. Okay. Now I got this tucked up because I'm basically getting my center area open. Okay. And this is just another one. I mean, this is one that is great for this because this does not fray. Well, this frays like nothing you have ever seen. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking. I've got it right next to it. I've aligned my centers, and I'm trying to see and get around top to bottom my edge here. Okay. So that I can, once lined up, I'll see if I'm above and below, and I am, my lettering. Then, very carefully, because you are on your label, I want to make sure that I am as out. Okay, that way. Make sure I line it up again. Pull this up. A little bit extra. Okay. So I've got the rough outline. not want to roll over my pen. How much of this is still attached? And if you want to start with a bigger piece, you can. I'm using this cutoff piece from one of my sides, so I don't have to go back and take just a little block off of a full-size piece. Okay. There we go. So what I'm going to do is very carefully pin this, and then I'm going to stitch it all the way around on the inside, okay? So I'm going to utilize all of my pins that I have in here, and I might add some more depending on my size. If I had a larger label, I might need more pins, but I might be able to get away with these 2 per side. We'll find out. I'm trying very hard not to stretch it, but remember, this polyester, it's not going to stretch. However, this fleece will stretch. So that is why I'm pinning it very well. There we go. Okay. I'm going to check. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to stitch around the outside. Then what I'm going to do is fold over and cut this a little closer to that line. And in fact, I might stitch twice because this is very fraying. So I'll stitch around twice just to be good or safe. Trim away this so it's behind this red line, red side, okay? Once I do that, I'll come back to you. but it's double stitched because remember, again, fleece isn't going to fray. So I am going to trim down to probably 1/4 of an inch. I'm not going to go really tight to this because if it ever does fray, I want it to have as long as possible before it gets that far. And what I might end up doing is, if I think it needs it, is do another line just a little further out. So what I'm going to do with this once I get it done is, here is the front corner. I'm going to put it right on the back of the Razorback one. Because I didn't put it on before like I did with one of the other quilts, I'm just going to actually outline this with a pen from the other side, center this in it, and then I'm going to hand stitch it down. All right. Here we are. Always make sure you orientate your quilt accurately. One thing I did not do was kind of square up the front. So I am going to kind of get my wonky sides out. I don't have to get it exact, otherwise I'd be using the rotary cutter. Okay. Open up. Get it looking correct. Now, this is wider than the block is, so I am putting it in between my corners as best I can, and that does not look right. That looks like it's off. All right. Not too well folded, did it? Don't want to get too far out. Side to side looks good. Okay, so place that in the front, top, place that on the bottom. Kind of hold it, and I'm on that edge, and I'm on that edge. So I can just stitch this around, or pin this around. Just pulling the pins from the front. Because once I get that placed, I don't need to keep those pins anymore. So I can use those. Now I'm not going to, and why I'm top stitching this now is I've already quilted it. And the quilting is a meander. And it is a curvy meander. So I don't want to try that. I would much rather just hand stitch it because it's not a very big label. Now, if I had thought about this before and I had kind of placed it, and like with the other quilt, I had done everything else, I could have figured out where enough that I knew where this corner was. I would have been able to easily put it in the way and then stitched all over it. Granted, it would have been serpentine, you know. It would have, you know, to follow that thing, it would have been that, but it would have been on. I still would have needed to, because it's serpentine and not rectangle or square like my other one, I would have had to come in and finished stitching anyway with my hand, by hand. So just hand stitching this in. What I will hand stitch, I can do it here, around here, to hold this in. But then I'll also out here past where the edge of the label is, okay? Now, if I really didn't care if it showed on front, I would stitch that way, but it would look very odd to have a square there. Now, that's where it would be good to continue, and instead of doing free motion, if you're doing this on your domestic and you're quilting the block, this would be perfect to quilt. I would just make this large enough to fit outside this, like a ½ inch around, all the way around. That way you can sew this, then later come back and maybe nip it a little right on the edges so you can mimic your fringe here. All right, so I'm going to hand stitch this. That is probably something very boring to watch, but once I get ready to hand stitch it, I will at least show you the beginning of it and then how I tie it off.